How did Aston Martin get it so wrong? Aston Martin walked into the 2026 with arguably more narrative momentum than any other team. They have a brand new wind tunnel, a state-of-the-art factory, a works Honda power unit, a double world champion in Fernando, and the sport's greatest designer, Adrian Newey. But lower Bahrain testing totals, reliability issues, and a dramatic early exit from testing have turned ambition into adversity. And today we're going to unpack the latest developments from Bahrain testing and why Aston Martin's testing performance isn't just disappointing, it could reshape their entire season. So let's get into it. In Bahrain, the numbers tell the story, and it's not a good one. Aston Martin's struggles in Bahrain were headline-making, and they're not in a good way. On the final day of the second Bahrain test, the team completed just 6 laps. 6 laps before ending its running early due to ongoing technical problems. My God, that is not a testing program. That is a red flag. Even relative to other teams who are in difficulty and playing catch-up, like Williams, Audi and Cadillac, who are new, Aston Martin logged far fewer laps, leaving them with no meaningful race data, simulation, nothing at such a critical point in the season. Now, you might think, oh, is that sandbagging? No, that is not down to sandbagging. That's down to unresolved faults and an inability to be ready when that track was accessible. Testing wasn't just underwhelming. It was downright disappointing. And Lawrence Stroll's face showed everything. Now, the issues. The issues, they're not cosmetic, right? They are absolutely fundamental. They are systems-based. Aston Martin's final testing laps were cut short after a battery-related trouble reared its ugly head once again. This is not new. You'd think they might have been able to address this problem. In fact, something like this should have been addressed before they came to testing. Their early running had already been hampered by gearbox problems, which limited Lance and Alonso to getting any meaningful laps completed. And this just magnified the deficit they had in lap count. Now, gearbox problems, battery problems are not minor gremlins. This is hardware that prevents race simulations, prevents calibration of energy deployment under the real-world conditions, which is what testing was about, and it denies Aston Martin getting any insight into how the car will perform over race distance. Now, in a year where energy harvesting, power recovery and braking balance are going to be absolute king, it's a disaster, and nobody will want to be in their place. By the end of testing, Aston Martin have not shown signs that they have addressed any questions on reliability and repeatability. They are heading into the beginning of the season with more unknowns than knowns. So are they behind the curve? Well, yeah. Inside the paddock, there's growing commentary. There's a lot of commentary. It's not growing. In fact, there's all people can talk about that their problems aren't isolated. They're structural, which is quite concerning. Reports have been going around that the team's Honda power unit has struggled to meet energy recovery demands at key regulatory thresholds, which has made the usable race data even harder to accumulate. That's not the kind of challenge you solve during the week. That is not the kind of challenge that they're going to be able to solve before going to race 1 in Melbourne. That's a systems level design, and it's a huge testing challenge. And some say it may take months. I think it could take an entire season. On the upside for Red Bull, it makes their decision look absolutely mastery. At least someone's winning out of this. Now, the last 48 hours, critics, including myself, have not held back. A lot of commentary has labelled the team's early exit from Bahrain testing absolutely ridiculous. I haven't said ridiculous. I think it was necessary. They're arguing the decision for Aston Martin to pack up 3 hours before the session ended as being a desperate situation. And I'd say it is a desperate situation. And I don't think that's harsh. But we need to understand that they did it for very good reasons. Because behind the scenes, the requirements to preserve their fragile battery and a shortage of spare parts that Honda have created meant the team had to pull the plug. This wasn't sandbagging, right? This wasn't some sort of strategic game being played by Aston Martin. It was strategic. They are in survival mode. And Andy Cowell, right, their principal, was not at testing because the problem is so significant. He is in Japan working with Honda to solve these problems. It is a huge issue. I'm questioning whether Aston Martin will be ready to race in Melbourne. What is the impact and why does this matter for 2026? Let me connect some dots for you. So everyone knew the regulation change was a reset. We all knew that, right? We'd been talking about that for at least the last 12 months, if not the last couple of years. What Aston Martin didn't expect was a team with Adrian Newey and the people he could bring in to be this far behind on their learning and development curve. When we look at the teams, Alpine, Haas, Cadillac, even them, who one may say have less of a pedigree of talent, they've managed a more meaningful running than Aston Martin, and that's saying something. Aston Martin had no race simulations. They didn't do any long runs, so they got no data, and therefore they have no true understanding of the behaviour of the car, so they can't validate what they didn't find. That's the testing every team needed before the season began. And they're the only ones that didn't do anything meaningful. That's a huge gap that Aston Martin has to close. And they don't have any runway left to do it before the season starts. Now, what does this mean for Fernando? Well, Fernando Alonso has been very clear, especially in the last 24 hours. His future in Formula One is conditional on Aston Martin's performance under these new regulations. As he stated, this will be his last time in F1 with any regulation change. He has repeatedly signalled that 2026 could be his last year, but only if the AMR 26 delivers performance and reliability. Official reports coming out of Spain reinforce this. According to recent reports, read this, Alonso's continuation in the sport depends on Aston Martin delivering a competitive car, which to date they have not shown. If the AMR 26 fails to show front-running performance, he may retire at the end of 2026. Now that's a major statement when you consider his career and that he hasn't won since 2013, so he is desperate to get a win. While Aston Martin have been struggling in testing, Alonso has, I suppose, struck a pragmatic tone. He acknowledged there were lots of problems to fix, but he insisted the team has solutions in place and they can overcome them, maybe. And he's even suggesting before Australia. But even he admitted everything can be fixed, but we just need to wait and see. Cautious optimism, but it ain't any confidence. It's not a confident response. And most crucially, he has indicated 2026 could be his last year in F1 if Aston Martin's performance meets his expectations. So I love this fact that he's saying that if he has a good year and they are competitive, he will consider retiring. But if not, he's going to stick around and have another crack. Okay. Why does Alonso's actions matter? Well, most drivers plan their career moves around results. You're not winning, they leave. They're winning, they stick around. Well, in a way, Alonso's doing that, but he is planning his exit around the competitiveness of the car. So if Aston Martin can't deliver even midfield performance early this season, he may just go. It's not because he wants to go, but because he wants to finish on a competitive note, which he will not get to do with this car. So that could impact team morale significantly. It'll definitely impact their sponsorship interests and the long-term investment in Aston Martin. So this will not please Lawrence at all. Lawrence has done a great job building that brand and building this team. And really, to lose Alonso early in the 2026 season would significantly impact the brand. Additionally, though, the other impact is there are suggestions that other top drivers who won't have a seat yet or may be considering crossing over to Aston Martin, who could that be, right? They may see that as far less attractive than it was. And therefore, again, Aston Martin will lose out. And that, I have to say, given who may be going there, that's a big deal. So overall, for Aston Martin, the problem isn't just their speed. Here's where I see the alarm bells are ringing loud and are deafening. This isn't purely about being the slowest either. This is all about preparation, and Aston Martin are completely unprepared. F1 in 2026 isn't won by the pace. It's won by understanding energy deployment, braking integration, and race endurance, because that's the management that's going to be required to race these cars. None of which Aston Martin have any idea about with their car. Aston Martin hasn't even really scratched the surface on understanding their car, how much energy it can generate, how quick it can go, how many laps can it run for, how much energy can be put back into the battery through braking. And then we talk about just the behavior of the car, because they have rear end problems, right? There is significant issues that they can't even get to address because they can't even get out there on the track and run the car. Are so far behind that it's almost like they are racing in 2025. They're that far back. And I bet you they wish they could have their 2025 car. Well, anyway, they're competing in a completely different league, completely different data set than everyone else. I'll balance my assessment like this. Firstly, for Aston Martin, yes, Newey is a genius. Can he pull a rabbit out of a hat? I don't know. Yes, Honda has a championship pedigree. So yes, they were with Red Bull for a long time and they've been around in this game for many decades. But can they too pull a rabbit out of their hat? Yes. Regulations could allow a turnaround. There could be some changes to the regulations before the season starts that may just play into Aston Martin's hands, but that is more hope than planning. But you don't start a marathon, right, with your legs tied together. You just don't. Aston Martin's problems aren't cosmetic. They are system-based and they are foundational. The team knew going into Bahrain they were on the back foot. They were flat on their ass, to be honest. But this is worse than anybody could have predicted. Everybody could have said, there'll be some teething problems. But this is beyond the pale. These guys, it's as if they haven't been doing anything for 12 months, 2 years, and they just decided to start doing their homework at the beginning of the year. It's really bad. This Aston Martin situation is worse than anyone predicted. So the question now isn't if they'll improve, it's how quickly and whether that gap ever fully closes. Let me know your thoughts. Could Aston Martin still recover? Drop your comments in the section below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Also, check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you haven't already. I'm Nathan. Thanks for tuning in to All Motorsports Podcast. Check out this video if you haven't already, and I'll catch up with you again in the next video. Cheers.